backlog and release plan are such that I contend that we prioritize everywhere in Agile, right? It's not just once, it's everywhere.
No, it's like this continuous process. And, it's almost, in my experience with, my clients is they're just, they're constantly having this dialogue and this discussion about what's business value. But what they're thinking about is in different time frames, which can add a bit of complexity because, make a choice now for what you need to do maybe in the next sprint, but you're also having conversations about what's coming next. And so there's a lot of, I like this diagram here of the different, planning onion type concept from Mike Cohn's, different layers and different conversations you have.
Yeah, now for the Scrum community, for the attendees, I'm going to give you a different option to think about. This is sometimes called the planning onion, and I point out that when you're cooking, onions make you cry when you cut them, and your Scrum should not make you cry. It should make you happy. It should make you warm. So I call this the planning flame because I think it provides warmth and guidance to the Scrum teams. When you're looking at this, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, when I look at this, and I'm just going to geek out on you, I think of like different planets orbiting the sun, and they have different cycles or periodicity. So that's when I look at that diagram, I don't see necessarily an onion, but I see what you're saying about the crying. Yeah, I don't like it when my clients cry.
Yes, we don't like it when they cry. Now, one of the things that I'll point out is that at the higher level items, the customers want big chunks of value, right? So it's interesting that customers of our products and services want really big chunks of things, which we call epics, and these tend to go in the roadmaps, but the Agile teams want small stuff that fits into the sprint, and the small stuff is what goes into the backlog because we take the epic and we grind it up into the backlog, and this process is called grooming and refinement. And what I want to talk with you today about is Carlton, when I'm working on the Centennial backlog with my own team, what I find is that I have this feeling of what I call my mushy middle, because when I'm done in that process, there's backlog items like where I talk with my team or I talk with my customers, and it's like, we just got to do this. We know we have to do this. And in fact, one of our attendees pointed out that compliance, Chris Riley said compliance is a trumping prioritization factor. It's the only thing bigger than a hippo. He's right. I mean, sometimes, and in fact, Centennial just did some security upgrades to make sure our components were, so there's stuff that we know we're going to do. And then as a product manager for Centennial, there's stuff I know I'm not going to do, but it seems like all of my effort is put into the mushy middle. Is that your experience with your other clients, or is that just something that's unique to me?
No, I see this all the time, and in fact, I tell my clients, spend your time focusing on the mushy middle, thinking about compliance. I mean, I had this one organization, and a lot of their product managers weren't getting a lot of new features that their customers were asking for because the organization was so far behind on compliance that all the development effort was spent on, well, we got to be this compliant for this different standard, this statutory requirement from the federal government. And it was frustrating for the product managers because their mushy middle was like really, really small. And they were fighting over these few features that could get that was for the time that was available. So there was so much compliance work. I also think I share with my clients, you have down here the stuff you will not do. I was surprised at the clients that I have that spend a lot of time trying to prioritize that stuff. I'm like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Just put a number on it and move on if you have to.
Right, and now I guess what we should say in this webinar, are we really thinking that we, and I know my own point of view is what we're really talking about here today is not this, and really not this, but techniques that can help the product owners and Scrum teams address that. Because if you know you need to, that you're going to do it, then just go ahead and get it to the top of your backlog and do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so everyone who's listening,
testing things. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, then everyone who's listening, keep in mind that our intention is not to try and change the point of view of the business, meaning if the business knows there's something that needs to be done, we know that goes to the top of the list. Compliance items, security items, customer commitments, contract requirements, or whatever it is. It's that we're really focused on this mushy middle today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my comment was, that's the area where you really want to test and explore with your hypothesis testing and your experiments if it's not clear.
Right. So this is where part of the techniques of a backlog item could be creating a backlog item where the backlog item merely feeds back into the backlog because it gave you learning and insight.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, let's get
I see a lot of those.
To understand prioritization, I think we need to dig deep. We need to understand how items are organized. And what we're going to do now for the participants is we're going to take you through in a few slides pretty quickly, but we're going to take you into some really deep concepts. So prioritization is a form of ordering. So let's say you have to do this, do that, or do the other thing. There's a couple of different orderings, right? You could do this, do that, and do the other thing. Like this is ordering 1. You could do that, do this, and do the other. That's ordering number 2. Or you could do ordering number 3, which is do other, do this, or do that. And there's additional orderings that aren't listed here. So we really are saying is that when you're in that mushy middle, you're trying to figure out what the ordering is of various backlogs. Now, to engage in the act of ordering, you need attributes because doing this and doing that are inherently unprioritizable. They're just two things to do. You need the attributes that help you prioritize. And once you have those attributes, you need values. Now, an attribute might be cost, or it might be, who has asked for it, or it might be the degree of regulatory compliance. These are all attributes that you could add to doing this or doing that. And what we have to do is we have to put a value in, but even that's not enough because you want to group the attributes into sensible approaches where you might have, for example, internal stakeholders like sales and service, and sales might say on the question, does this backlog item improve your ability to do your job? Then you want to be able to say yes or no. And finally, it also helps to realize that not everyone is equal. And Carlton, this is what I wanted to ask you about, is this notion of weighting of the prioritization attributes. In your experience, are people doing that? And if they are, is it helping or is it hurting?
I think what I love about this model, Luke, is I don't think they do a lot of weighting. So they may think about the does it help certain stakeholders or not, but they tend to the clients that tend to struggle with prioritization seem to think their stakeholders are all equal, or they don't really make visible that some people have greater weighting than others. And that's why I really like this method, is because it again starts that dialogue around, who has more weight in the organization? Is it sales or service? Now, maybe service doesn't realize they don't have as much weight as sales or whatnot, but that's an important dialogue to have in an organization. Are we sales driven or are we service driven? And really making that visible with this model really helps drive that dialogue.
Now, Carlton, could it be the case that these weights change? Like, here's what I'm thinking about. Like, let's say that you've got, if this represents the product market life cycle, and we know that products kind of go through this S-shaped curve of adoption. would it be fair, or would it be wrong to say that maybe sales is more important here, but maybe service is more important for a product that's out there? Would that be okay?
Oh, absolutely. I get worried when this, and I see it sometimes. You look, the weighting is really static, right? And if the markets were static, or if the products were static, maybe the weighting would be static. But we all know markets are very dynamic, products are very dynamic, and so the importance of different stakeholders changes over time depending on business conditions, where the product is in its life cycle itself. And I say if you have a document like this, or like a backlog that's been static for 3 to 6 months, you got a problem. You need to get back and look at it. Look at those weightings.
That's interesting. So
have that.
So I want to jump in on that. This notion of this, partly because Lori Spinello, if I said that name correctly, asked a question that I think we can address in the real-time webinar, which is, can this be done at the feature level, or should it be done at a lower level attribute? Lori, I think that this should be done pretty uniformly for the items in your backlog that are associated with your mushy middle. And what I mean by that is, if you know you need to do work on an item, like if you have to do the item, then just flat out don't worry about all of these attributes, because now you're wasting time, because you're adding information to content that you already have an agreement. These attributes should be really applied fairly uniformly to the items in the mushy middle. That would be my advice. Would you agree with that, Carlton?
Yeah, I think so. I think we really want to think about the attributes of on the middle, because if we try to use these attributes for the entire backlog, you almost get information overload. And like as you've been talking about, you get the point of diminishing returns. What's the benefit of having a weighted value on a feature you absolutely have to do? For instance, a compliance issue or a regulatory requirement. You have to build it. There's no there's no benefit of having that further dialogue. So.
Yeah, and I would also add that to this conversation is that the whole point of having attributes is you want to apply them uniformly, because it helps you